The Celtics would be interested in this. Last season, Durant averaging more points, rebounds, and assists per game while shooting at a much higher percentage. But where things get interesting is the age in the contract. Durant will be 34 in September and is signed for the next 4 years at $192.5 million. Jaylen is 25 and has 2 years left on his deal. That's where we begin our deep dive as we bring in former Suns general manager and Celtics executive Ryan McDonough, along with Forsberg, our Celtics insider. Ryan, let's start with you. Give us some realistic trade options that could potentially get this thing done. We're all assuming Jaylen Brown has to be part of the package.
I think realistically he does, guys. I mean, there are ways to do it mathematically and mechanically without Brown in it, involving first-round picks and pick swaps over the next 5 years. Boston has all of their first-round picks available between 2023 and 2027. Keep in mind, you can't trade outright picks, especially unprotected firsts, in consecutive drafts, but they could give, say, 3 firsts and 2 pick swaps in between. And Brooklyn gave up a lot to get James Harden. Keep in mind, they still owe a bunch of picks and pick swaps to the Rockets. So that's something I think the Celtics probably would do if they could keep Brown out of it. However, in reality, I think Brown has to be in it. And then, so it's a real decision for the Celtics front office. I disagree with Scal. This is not a no-brainer just because of the age difference. You're talking about an 8 or 9 year age difference between the players, and because it's not going to be just Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant. That does not work. Boston needs to send out more, including Chris's beloved Robert Williams, potentially Marcus Smart, somebody like that. There need to be more players in the deal beyond Brown to make it work.
Well, Ryan, I just want to keep it with you for a second. Having sat in that chair, is that a move you would make? Say it would have to be Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. Would that be a deal you would be willing to pull the trigger on? Of course, it might be some first-round picks involved as well. But those being the major pieces, Brown and Smart for Durant, would you say yes?
I would probably say no. I know I'm probably in the minority here because if you bring in Kevin Durant, approaching 34 years old, Al Horford's in his mid-30s, you have Jason Tatum, that's a great trio, but you're down 2 really good young players in Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. And then I don't know how you backfill, guys, the rest of your roster. One of the things we saw with the Celtics in the finals that surprised me into the negative is that Boston's bench was outplayed by Golden State's bench in the finals. Jordan Poole and Gary Payton II outplayed Boston's bench in Game 6. So this team would be giving away some depth. It would be giving away a lot of youth. And so I just don't know how you backfill around those guys. Let me put it this way. I think that the depth would be thinned out. The payroll would be expensive, and you'd have a very short window to hit it before Horford and Durant age out of their prime.
Is that window enough, Forsberg, to maybe make the Celtics pull the trigger on that kind of move, even if you and Ryan aren't?
So it's tough because you think about when they got KG. KG was, 30? So you still knew you had, and they didn't know it was going to be a 5-year window, but you at least had the hope that there would be a time to go over that. And with Durant, as much as I do think he'll be a good, very great, whatever adjective you want to use, player in this NBA until he's 38, 39 years old, as long as he wants, because he's just such a lethal scorer. I do worry that you're shortening your window overall, and that there is the prospects here with a Jays core to really just build this thing out over time. And you add in, Smart's young age and Robert Williams, and there's really the potential here for this to be special over the long term. And so I get it. Like, it's always a balance. You tell me that you have Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant, that's a contender, no matter how you backfill the rosters. You have to consider it. But if it fizzles, if one of those guys gets hurt in a season, if Kevin Durant, for whatever reason, can't produce at age 38, it is the ultimate dice roll for a team that was 4.5 minutes away from a 3-1 lead in the NBA Finals with the core that it has. And so, look, none of these decisions are easy. I don't envy Brad Stevens and his crew having to ponder these things, but I do think it's more than just NBA 2K, oh man, Kevin Durant would look really good next to Jason Tatum. You have to kind of look at the totality of it.
Well, if you could somehow figure out a way to bring in Durant and still keep Robert Williams and still keep Al Horford and still keep Derek White.
What fantasy land are we living in here? What are you giving the Nets?
We just put a package together with Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown. Those guys are gone, and I'm saying the rest of your roster, the bones of your roster, are still available. If you could figure that out, to me, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because nobody wants Kevin Durant, except for Scal, who we keep bringing in from last night. Thank goodness we have that sound from Scal. It sounds like, based on what I've heard this offseason from Brad Stevens, he might not be willing to make this deal either. I think he's on your side. Let's take a listen to Stevens because this feels like the time to make a move when it presents itself like this. But here's what Stevens said Tuesday.
We have to walk a fine line a little bit. I think teams are fragile. I think the way that teams work together and operate together are fragile. Just to add doesn't mean that you're not taking something away from the group. And to change significant pieces in the group doesn't mean that might not totally take your identity and shift it in a direction that's not as successful.
Ryan, so when he's talking about his identity, I think we all understand this is a team that is rooted in its defense and its ability, even more specifically, to switch everyone. And I know that's part of the value that Marcus Smart brings to the table. So if they were to acquire Durant and lose a couple of key pieces, would they not be able to maintain that identity to an extent, at least? Is Durant a serviceable defensive player at this point in time? And would they not be better getting a significant upgrade offensively, even if it means a little bit of a hit on the defensive end?
Kevin Durant, when the stakes are the highest, has the potential and is a very good defender in the playoffs. You're probably not going to get it consistently night in and night out over the course of 82 games at this point in his career. But with his size and length and athleticism, he gets deflections, steals, he blocks shots. He's still very athletic. His potential is undeniable. I think what Brad Stevens was referring to, though, was if you look at the core of this team, Tatum, Brown, Smart, Williams, those four guys, they're in their mid-20s. This really shortens that window, that thins out their depth. Kevin Durant is great, but to kind of Chris's point earlier, if you do this and then it doesn't work out alongside Durant, then what do you do? I think you've set yourself back going forward. Certainly the championship window isn't open as long as it appears to be right now.
All right, one significant question about Durant's future is, does he want to even leave Brooklyn? Durant faced tremendous backlash when he joined the Warriors super team and then again when he joined forces with Kyrie. But Scal thinks a move to Boston could actually help Kevin Durant's legacy.
That is a legit legacy move for Kevin Durant. And he has made some moves. Like, I think he should have made the Golden State Warrior. I didn't have a problem with it. They crushed the NBA. They were the best team, maybe one of the greatest teams ever when you look at the differential between how good they were and the next best team. But the move to Brooklyn was not a great move.
Yeah.
He can salvage that by coming here and joining up with some people that he has respect for and connections with.
All right, so Amina Smith is back with us now. Amina, do you think Boston would be an attractive place for Durant, despite the obviously complicated history between Boston and Durant's buddy Kyrie Irving?
I think attractive is maybe not the right word, but I think that Kevin Durant, when you talk about his future and playing basketball, I think what he cares about right now is winning a championship. When you talk about Boston and where they are right now, this is a team that's close to that goal that he has. So I don't know if being attractive is something that, maybe Kevin Durant really cares about, but I know that maybe Kyrie Irving has said some things, maybe in private. We know that both of them are obviously friends, and maybe he said things about the fan base, but I think the organization as a whole, I can't see why Kyrie Irving would tell Kevin Durant bad things about that, because I don't feel like there was any bad blood there between Kyrie Irving and the Celtics in terms of just how he was treated. So Kevin Durant, I think that he looks at it as, hey, am I going to get closer to my goal? Yes, then I'm going to take that step.
Ryan, could you see Durant having Boston on his no-fly list, essentially? If you're looking at it just across sports, it feels like usually if the opportunity, whether it's the opportunity to play or the opportunity to win, and the money are there, that's enough to get a player to go almost anywhere. But I know the NBA can be a little bit different, and especially when these guys, hold the hammer in terms of where they end up. Do you think Durant would be interested in Boston with all the power that it looks like he'll have in this situation?
I do, Phil. And the main reason I say that is because in 2016, when KD was a free agent, the Celtics are one of the handful of teams he met with, and the guys in Boston's front office thought they had a legitimate chance. And the rest of the league thought they had a legitimate chance of signing Kevin Durant then. Obviously, we know what happened. He went to Golden State. They went to the finals, I believe, 3 times. They won 2 championships. So it worked out great in the short term. But yeah, I think Boston would be on his short list of teams. But keep in mind, a lot needs to happen between now and then. Over the next couple of days, we'll see what happens with Kyrie. He's got a $37 million player option. But I think if Brooklyn is going to trade Kevin Durant, which I think they would only do if Kyrie is not on the roster, then I think Boston has the assets and the ability to be on that short list of teams that could not only give Brooklyn a good package, but that KD would be open to joining.
And to Ryan's point, you think back to that 2016 recruitment. Who was the other piece there? Al Horford, who would still be here. And he does have a relationship with Ime Udoka from Ime's time with Brooklyn as an assistant for a year. He has professed his love for Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart. So if those pieces were still here, I think there's a lot of reasons that Kevin Durant would find this situation attractive. But I do wonder, and mentally, can he shift teams again? Can he just admit that the Brooklyn thing was a failure and force his way to another destination? It almost feels like he's got to figure out, especially with all the heat he's taken departing Golden State, can he find a way to make it work with Brooklyn? And maybe that's just Kyrie goes out, a new sidekick comes in, they figure it out with Ben Simmons and all of what happens next. But I think it's a lot less likely that Durant is just like, here, I want to go to another contender.
All right, well, Durant spoke today about Irving and his contract situation on his ETCs with Kevin Durant podcast. Durant is staying out of it. He says, quote, "It's no involvement at all. I can't be involved with it. This is this man's livelihood. This is much bigger than me being a free agent. It's one of the most important times in your career that can't be swayed by anybody else. I just do me and wait for the time." Durant added, quote, "Whatever happens, the friendship will still be there." So, Amina, do you think Kyrie Irving is going to impact this decision in any way for Kevin Durant? Because he could end up back in Brooklyn. That didn't necessarily sound like a guy who's dying to continue playing with Kyrie Irving. What if Irving ends up back in Brooklyn and Durant says, "I'm actually good here, guys. I'd like to go somewhere else"?
I don't really think that Kyrie Irving's decision is going to impact Kevin Durant. And that answer that he gave was so Kevin Durant. I do me and play basketball. He does not want to involve himself in what anybody else has going on. And I don't blame him. I think that maybe people who are watching from the outside looking in, I think we're putting more weight on Kyrie Irving's decision than Kevin Durant is in terms of what he wants to do moving forward. So I don't really think that Kyrie Irving, whatever he decides to do, whatever his relationship is with the Nets, that's going to affect Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is looking at, hey, am I going to win a championship? That was the whole goal in 2019. I think that people are losing sight of that, and I think that's more of what Kevin Durant is focused on.
Ryan, do you think this Kyrie decision, this impending Kyrie decision, ends up impacting where Durant plays next year?
No, because I think Kyrie either re-signs in Brooklyn or they do a sign and trade and bring back a win-now player to help Kevin Durant. Because if you look at the teams with cap space around the league, they are not marquee destination markets. Portland, Indiana, Detroit, San Antonio. Is Kyrie Irving opting out of $37 million to go to any of those teams? No, of course not. And then is he opting out to go to Lakers, as has been reported, for $6 million? Well, I can't see him leaving $30 million on the table under any circumstance. So I think he's either back in Brooklyn as a Net, or the Nets do a sign and trade and bring in somebody else to help KD win.